agenda this year, and I see some of the things that we're working on is moving through the House quite smoothly. Representative Chris England bill that gives insight and oversight that was proposed by the ACLU amongst other organizations has moved out of committee and is going for a full vote. So that's one of the things that we've really been focusing on. So let's back some. 2019, y'all. Everybody know in 2019, DOJ came in and said that our prisons weren't where they were supposed to be. They aren't adequate. And we've been fighting this fight ever since. We tried to alleviate House Bill 380 even before it ever started, amongst many other things. Over the course of these years, we've stopped prison bills. We've stopped core civic from coming in, and y'all, we keeping on moving and shaking until we get to the grounds that we need to be on. Let's look at policing for profit. That's one of the things that we're fighting right now today as we speak. Brookside, small town in Alabama. Brookside revenue was increased to $610,000 annually from fines and forfeitures alone. So many people wonder why we're constantly screaming, defund the police. This is one of those reasons why. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep pushing our legislators. One of the things about our prison construction plan or our stopping prison bill that was most important to me is that we crossed all party lines. Me, with my locks, being a Black girl, went to Briarfield, went to Tallahassee, and I spoke to my Republican constituents inside the state of Alabama, explained to them why we didn't want prisons. They told us why they didn't want prisons. And together we stopped core civic from coming in and building prisons in the state of Alabama. More so than anything, bipartisan efforts are the most important things in order for us to get things continuously accomplished in the state of Alabama. So we're pushing forward, we're moving forward. And I'm just happy to have everybody here today. And I'm excited to see what this election year is going to bring in terms of Alabama's House and Senate and gubernatorial race. And I'm here for all of it, y'all. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. I'm Dev Wakely. I'm a worker policy advocate with Alabama Arise. I've been covering criminal justice issues for quite a while. And I'm going to talk to you about some specifics of some of the bills that we see this year. To begin with, there are a couple of bad ones that we're seeing and a couple of good ones that aren't really moving very much. We have bills out there, you know, the first and foremost rule of legal drafting is usually if a bill is named for somebody, it's a bad one. And we have bills now that would prohibit release, that are attempts to go through the legislature that would prohibit release of anybody who's convicted of manslaughter, both through good time and through parole. These are relics, and because they are named for a former police officer who was killed, in some cases, they are moving a little bit, but we have hopes that we will be able to stop those bills. In terms of good bills that we have not moving, unfortunately, we have HB 220 by Representative Coleman, which would require that any time served or reductions from terms of confinement be applied retroactively. That one is also not moving yet. But the two big ones really are HB 57 and SB 215. HB 57 is Representative England's bill. That bill has passed House Judiciary already. It's been placed on the special order calendar one time, but was carried over really to, frankly, to allow the Senate version to move a little bit. And the Senate version is interesting for a couple of reasons. Senator Bobby Singleton is the primary sponsor on that bill, but that bill is actually bipartisan in sponsorship with Senator Tom Whatley as one of the co-sponsors. Now that is, that's particularly useful because Whatley chairs Senate Judiciary. That bill is up this week in Senate Judy, and I say this week, today at 1. As a matter of fact, that bill's going to get out. It will, and that will add to the momentum and hopefully carry Representative England's bill a little further as well. Because the House is a little more difficult in terms of criminal justice reforms for a couple of issues, for a couple of reasons. And the biggest one is that there is a massive police lobby in the House of Representatives compared to the Senate. And there's also a significantly higher presence of former prosecutors in the House as well. So you have a lot more sort of reliable opponents of any reform, sort of folks you get your knee-jerk reactions against doing anything to actually build a modern incarceration system. So that's why the House is generally a heavier lift on bills like this. And if we can get the Senate bill all the way through the Senate and the House bill all the way through the House, the idea is that they may be made to be exactly similar, but there's also the issue that the House bill may require further amending at some point, and if that's the case, they would have to go to conference committee and be reconciled to each other to be the exact same bill. As for the specifics of the bills themselves, really what this bill would do is well, there are a couple of different moving parts to the bill. It would create a policy development council that would basically institute policies and procedures that would require the Board of Pardons and Paroles to follow its own rules, really. These rules are in place, but they are not currently presumptive. The board can ignore them at will and does so regularly. Part of the issue that we've seen with the board recently is that they tend to see themselves currently, or at least some parts of the board do, as a brake on letting people out. Instead of determining whether people are ready to reenter society, they view themselves as a bar to reentry. It's a fundamental misinterpretation of their basic role, and the chair of the board has done nothing to fix that, because she labors under that misapprehension of her own role as well. So what you end up seeing a lot of time at BPP hearings is retrying the case, basically. So you end up with a situation where instead of looking at whether a person is ready to reenter, whether a person has the support structure necessary to get out and maintain a life and build a life for themselves without reoffending, you end up with a lot of much more focus really on the initial crime itself. And while the circumstances of the offense are properly considered under the parole guidelines currently, that's only a small part of what should be considered under the board's own rules and regulations. Unfortunately, it's what they tend to focus almost exclusively on now. So HB 57, as introduced and amended, would do a couple of things, really. Part of the issue with the board is that the enabling legislation, the legislation that creates it, kind of fosters this sort of misunderstanding of the board's own view. There's some language in HB 57 that would change the current statute that talks about, that's more framed in terms of restricting release, in terms of the board shall not release unless, and changing that language to a simple descriptive term of what the board is supposed to do. Additionally, one of the most glaring oversights to the current mechanisms of considering a person's application is that the board doesn't actually have to consider any statement from the person who's applying currently. Effectively, the board is willfully blind to the actual statements of the people who are applying for release. And that's just because we have structured this board in a way that simply doesn't value the input of the people who are applying for release. This bill would fix that, and that's the House and the Senate version. Both of them as existing right now would require, and I don't see any sponsor being willing to allow an amendment to strip that out. And frankly, I don't see that much opposition to that particular aspect of it as well. It's the opposition, I think, is more opposed to generally anything that would allow people out, frankly, than they are to any particular aspect of it. So one area where those bills now differ is that a couple of amendments were placed on the House version to get it out of House Judiciary. And they're fairly small amendments, but they still will need to be dealt with. Part of the amendment, the process there was to take jurisdiction out of the circuit court of Montgomery County, and to instead allow jurisdiction for appeals of decisions to go to the Court of Criminal Appeals instead. That is there for a couple of reasons. Part of the rationale behind that might be that these appeals are in fact appellate procedure and therefore should go to an appellate court. But there's another more sinister aspect as well. If you consider the fact that Montgomery County is trending toward being a more in-play county across the board, and has much more considerable, especially Black representation throughout the county than the state does generally at the Court of Criminal Appeals level. So that's a consideration as well. And that may just be a compromise that needs to be made in order to get that bill out. So over the next couple of weeks, we hope to see these bills both pass their individual houses and come to a reconciliation process if necessary. The Senate could, of course, amend to follow the amendments in the House's HB 57, but whether that occurs or not, the House still could amend that bill further into when it comes time for it to be actually put up on the floor. So we're a little uncertain. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in any election, in any year, but especially in an election year with the criminal justice reform bill. But these bills are both moving, and I fully expect to see both of them move further fairly soon in the next couple of weeks. I'm pretty optimistic about these bills. I would be glad to take any questions on these if anyone has any. Feel free to either drop it in the chat or just come off mute if you're able to yourselves.
Dev, this is Jim Williams. Let me ask, hi. Is it premature to be contacting our senator and representatives about these bills?
Well, as for your senator, it might be a little premature because that bill's just up in Judy today. We actually sent an action alert out to the committee at Arise. We sent an action alert out to folks whose senators are on the Judiciary Committee. But since yours is Del Marsh, he's not on there. Yes. We'll be sending you one though when it comes time. We will definitely be asking you to contact both your reps and your senator.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wakely, this is Charles Turnipseed. What is the feel of the waters? I mean, do we have I know it's a little early in the process. Do we have an idea of how much support this might get today on votes? I understand this is speculation in politics. I get that.
I gotta say, I'm pretty optimistic about this one today. I absolutely am. Good. The fact that Whatley is in favor of it is huge. That is a big deal, And I would be frankly surprised if SB 215 doesn't pass out of Senate Judy pretty quickly. Oh, and I see that Karen has a question in the chat, and that was SB 215 for the Senate bill number. Yeah, I try not to be too optimistic about election year criminal justice reforms most of the time, but I am optimistic about this one, and I think I have pretty good reason to be. Anybody else offhand?
Mr. Wakely, if I may follow up, since we're in a void here, a little silence. I have an additional concern. One reason I was eager to participate in today's meeting and efforts is not only is it a concern, the lack of hearings and the lack of input from the individual seeking parole, but then once it's granted, are there any efforts to examine the administration? It's my perception it's just a little too easy to violate, you know, and we're setting people up and putting them right back into the system. And I don't know, it seems sort of across the board, you know, on how the administration is handled, and we bounce these people right back into DOC.
You're absolutely right, and there are some efforts that are moving forward pretty well. For instance, Rep. Jim Hill, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, is carrying a bill to basically allow splits of splits, and to allow revocation discretion on the part of a judge. So currently, if somebody gets revoked, they're revoked, and this would allow judges to basically consider whether or not that's a terrible idea. So what it would do is allow basically, it would pretty much expand the availability of what are currently viewed as kind of dips and dunks.
Yes.
So the efforts to sort of remove that overly punitive, foolish on crime relic structure are proceeding pretty much across the board, and they are moving forward. But again, it's still, even though that bill's kind of moving pretty well, I would urge caution, because frankly I got burned being optimistic on that one. But the fact that he brought it back and it's still moving again this year is a significant positive.
That's promising. And in Alabama, I'm with you. I try not to build up my hopes anymore. I'm getting too old for that. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jim. Good to talk. Oh, Mr. Turner, sorry. Any other questions? Anybody? Well, look, even if you don't have one right now, feel free to reach out to me. I will drop my email in the chat here, and you can give me a shout, and I'll talk with you pretty much all you would want to, all you could ever imagine you'd want to hear from me on criminal justice reform issues. That's my email. Feel free to give me a shout, and I will pass it back over to Steph to go further. Thank y'all very much.
Hey y'all, I want to make sure folks can hear me. Can you give me a thumbs up in the chat or in the reactions if you can hear me okay? All right, cool. All right, so for the remainder of the time that we're here together before the press conference, I'll be doing a really quick, short review on our legislative processes. I'm by no means an expert in this area, so I just want to preface with that, particularly because what feels important about that for me is I feel like everyone can do this work, whether or not you have a paid position in an institution or organization that does policy work. My background is as an educator, as a teacher for elementary school, and I feel like I'm able to do this advocacy work because of the kind of education that I've got. So I just say all that because I sort of feel like sometimes advocacy work can feel a little bit intimidating, but I just want you to know same, and we can do this together. So I actually want to ground us in this particular graphic first, because this is actually what really is the foundation for the way that I approach this work. It's how I think about race and class and how it impacts Alabamians across the state. So if we're looking at this graphic on the left-hand side, we see the state population. So these numbers in red, the 28 and the 54, represent the percentage of Black Alabamians. So while Black Alabamians make up 28% of the state population, so a quarter-ish, they are disproportionately represented in the prison population at 54%, so a little over half. So whenever I'm talking about this work, when we're talking about what Dev shared before about parole reform and why we're here together, I'm grounded in this reality that we have a system that disproportionately harms Black Alabamians and working class people. So I'm going to give you all a second, and you're welcome to come off mute, or you're welcome to drop it in the chat. But this is the question that I have for y'all. So knowing what I shared, that brief statistic with y'all, and just knowing what you know about our criminal justice system here in Alabama, like, how are we addressing these racial disparities? How do we, yeah, that's the question for y'all. So I'm going to give you a minute to drop in the chat or to come off of mute and share your perspective of how we are addressing racial disparities in Alabama's criminal justice system. There's no right or wrong answers. I just want to know what y'all are thinking.
Hi, I'm Pastor Glasgow. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, hi, Pastor.
Okay, so one of the ways that we've been addressing it for the past 2 decades is through voting, getting people who have been purged off the voting list for felony convictions. We were very instrumental in Glasgow versus State of Alabama won the voting rights in 2008, and we won some other voting in other parts of the country, such as Florida and everywhere else. That's one of the ways that we're doing it. And we've been participating even further, looking at the gerrymandering as well as the redistricting. And that's how they disproportionately, you know, people of color, POCs, how they stop their voices by stopping their vote. So we don't have good representation in the way that they do it. And then looking at the prison part, what people seem to be missing in the redistricting is the gerrymandering part. How even in my lawsuit of 2008, one of the conditions was, or settlement agreements, was that they count people vote from where they come from, not from where they housed at. But in the census, they count them where they're housed at. And the redistricting, they count them where they're housed at. So that builds up them getting more money in those particular areas. Most of these prisons are in rural white communities, and that's where the jobs and the contracts and everything else go. So that's what we've been doing for the past 2 decades to address that.
Thank you so much, Pastor Glasgow. You were absolutely correct. So we heard the issue of voting, but connected to that, the problem of gerrymandering and redistricting. Thank you again for your incredible work on this. I would love to hear from other folks, whether you're in this work already or not. How do you imagine that we address these racial disparities? Just a couple other answers. So I see in the chat, someone is talking about voter restoration. There appears to be a fear of allowing people to vote after they've been subjected to Alabama's overly punitive laws. So yes, that's one way we address this work. Anything else before we move forward? All right, I have another comment in the chat. So in order to address racial disparities is to build a sense of trust between law enforcement and the residents. We get these numbers out to the community because this is not common knowledge. Katora, if I'm saying your name correctly, if you want to expand off of if you want to come off mute, that would be great.
Hi, you have to say it like you country, it's Katara.
Katara.
But I am I just graduated with a degree in criminal justice / social work. And the numbers that we know, what we studied, common people don't know. And like, when I was telling people, things that we had to research and things of that nature, they're like, oh, we didn't know. We just know, this is what, you hear in the news and whatnot. And it's just that, regular people who do not know someone in the system or know, what's going on, don't know the, like what's going on with the parole board, because my kid's father was denied April of last year, and after 9 years, and it's heartbreaking to see the work that he's done and not be rewarded, be able to come home. So it's just that we just got to get, the common folk to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Thank you so much for that. And
You're
I hear you saying a couple of things that feel really important,
Mhm.
particularly the piece around education. Like folks need
Right.
to be able to have access to the information, kind of
Right.
the stuff we're learning on this call. Fully
Yes, ma'am.
support that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So I don't want to necessarily cut anybody off, so feel free to add anything in the chat. But I'm going to move through quickly just a couple of slides, just to give us a little bit of information. Again, I said I'm no expert, but these are the things that I've learned from my brilliant colleagues who have taught me. So this is a breakdown of our legislative system here in Alabama. So on the left, you can see in the House, we have 77 representatives who are Republican and 28 Democrats. In the Senate, we have 27 and 8. So if you're looking at this graphic, you can obviously tell that there is a dominant power in our legislature. And so this impacts the work that we do for a variety of reasons. Let me see. Okay, great. I just wanted to give you all a snapshot of this. If anyone wants to, feel free to jump in and share how they think that this impacts our work together, by all means, please jump into the chat. But I'm going to move us forward because we have a few more minutes before we're going to get into a press conference. All right, so again, not the expert here, but here's what I got for y'all. So let's talk a little bit about this process. So a lot of y'all, or maybe, I don't know, when I was a kid, I remember in school, we often watched this video called Schoolhouse Rock. And it used to take us through the process of how a bill becomes a law. And while I can remember the words to that song, often this process becomes really confusing for me very quickly. So I just want you all to know that while I'm going to review just a few of the steps at the top level, you can also find this process at any time by going to the link at the bottom left corner of your screen. So I'm actually going to type this out because that might be helpful. So if you ever need this process to review how a bill becomes a law, you just need to go to bit.ly bill process AL. So that link should be able to take you to what you need to know. But let me get us started. Oops, I spelled it wrong. There we go. All right, so the first thing that happens is a bill is filed and sent to committee. So even right before that, something I have to remember is that lawmakers aren't necessarily the people who are writing the bills themselves. While often they are champions of a particular bill, there is a bill writer in the Statehouse. There are also institutions that help draft bills for lawmakers. And so just a tiny step before the bill is filed, please know that lawmakers aren't legit sitting there writing out bills. Maybe you already knew that, but I definitely didn't know that. So the bill is filed and then sent to committee. So for example, today we talked a little bit earlier about SB 215. So we know that bill is going to be in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And if I'm incorrect about this, someone please correct me, but I believe that that's what's going to happen today. Okay, so in the committee, there's a lot of power that happens within a committee on whether or not this bill can move forward. It's very often that bills will die right inside of the committee. They won't even see the floor of the House or the Senate. What's important here is this is our opportunity also as advocates to lend our voice to a particular bill, a particular issue or cause. This is often a moment where you can call for a public hearing to be able to speak your piece about a bill. So this is a really critical moment for the legislative process for how a bill becomes a law. If it's able to pass out of committee, then the bill can now go to the floor to be debated, to be discussed. This is when often, if you've been able to watch some of the live streams, often you'll see folks up at a podium talking about a bill. This is when that part of the process is happening. So if the bill, for example, is able to pass one of the chambers, then it has to repeat the same process in the next chamber. So this is the part where I typically get confused, is because I'll think, oh, okay, it's already passed this, so it is set to go. But I always have to remind myself that it still has a whole other, like it has to do a whole other trip in the other chamber. So whether it's in the Senate or it has to move to the next one. Okay. All right, sorry. So the last thing I'll say before we move into this next piece real quick is just that once a bill passes both chambers, then this is when we see the bill go ahead and go to the governor's desk. This is an opportunity for her to either sign it into law or to veto it. And then the cycle can continue if she does veto it, or if she signs it to a law, then it becomes something that we have to practice. Again, I'm sorry if I'm moving a little bit quickly, but just I want to make sure that we have time for a tiny break before we have our press conference. So again, all of these materials will be sent out to y'all, so it's not like you have to memorize anything. All right, so here's the next thing I wanted to share with y'all. This is another thing that I feel like I struggle with committing to memory. So in order to look for your particular representatives, there's an easy way to do that at the Alabama legislators website. So I'm actually going to link this really quick for y'all. Give me 1 second to get that link. All right, so if you were to go to this particular website, it'll pull up the screen that you're seeing right now. And under the home button, I circled it in big red circle over and over again. That's the button that you would click. So once you click the home button, you can see that it's going to have a drop down menu, and it'll come up and it'll say find my legislator. So once you click on that, it'll bring you to a screen in which you'll type out your address. Something that's really helpful to note is that while the screen itself says just to put your zip code, I highly recommend you put in your whole address, because then it'll give you specifics. So once you fill out your information, you'll get all of your representatives from the federal level down to the state level. So that's, and you should actually pay attention, because that's another thing I would sometimes get confused, especially when I was younger, is I wouldn't necessarily know how to differentiate who were my reps at the federal level versus the state level. So that's how you can find your lawmaker. Again, this particular link will be sent to y'all if you signed up through this, and obviously you did, so you'll get it. Don't worry about memorizing it. Okay. All right, so the last piece that I wanted to mention before we take a little break before the press conference, and my colleague Jasmine Peeples will be talking about this call to action in a minute, but this particular ask is similar to what Dev was saying about how there's a letter that folks can sign on to regarding the parole bills that he discussed. And so this is an opportunity for you all to engage with your lawmakers. So some of the struggles that we often as lay people, especially if you're not in these spaces all the time, feel a lot of intimidation. But this is a really easy way to participate, because you simply get to sign on to a letter and express your perspective and make this demand around parole reform. So the last thing I'll say, besides the example that I gave you all, is when I'm doing this work as an advocate for various issues, these are the 3 things I really try to hold when I'm contacting my lawmakers. So like when you fill out that form or when you talk to them in person, these are the 3 things I really strongly encourage y'all to hold near and dear to your heart. So number 1, y'all are the expert of your own experiences. You know what you need and your community needs. And often I feel like we go and meet with lawmakers, we write to them, and we sort of assume that given their position that they are like, they know everything, that they have, maybe they have more expertise than us. And maybe that's not the case for everyone, but I do sort of feel like I've met a lot of advocates who don't trust that they are the expert in the room. So if that helps at all, you are the brilliant one. And then the second thing, and this is a lesson from my colleague Dillon Nettles, that the State House is the people's house. So again, we see it as this space where lawmakers have all of the control, and sometimes it really does feel that way, but we need to own the fact that the State House belongs to us as Alabamians, as people in this community, and we should be able to enter that space with that understanding. And then the last thing, especially when it comes to directly communicating with your lawmakers, I have been someone who has made the mistake of kind of vaguely not knowing what I wanted, but just knowing what I'm against. So we might be against like police oppression, but it's important to also know what you want. Not enough to just like know what you don't want, you have to know what your ask is. So Dev talked a lot about the ask around parole reform. So that is our ask today. We need to know our ask and we need to make it known to our lawmakers. And like I said, you have a couple of opportunities to do that, including the call to action that my colleague Jasmine will talk about a little bit later. All right, so I'm actually going to pause this here. Our press conference is supposed to start in 10 minutes. And we wanted to make sure that we gave folks a tiny break to use the bathroom or do what they needed to do. But if you all can come back here in 10 minutes and we will have the live stream for the press conference. So hopefully that works for folks. Hopefully you'll come back. Please don't drop off. I promise there's still really good information for the rest of this virtual lobby day. Thanks, y'all.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dana Sweeney, and I am here today with the Alabamians for Fair Justice Coalition. And we are here to rally in support of parole accountability, HB 57 and SB 215. We've got a couple of speakers who are here to share their support for this legislation today, beginning with the bill sponsor of HB 57, none other than Representative Sweeney.
Good afternoon. First, I want to say thank you all for coming. Sponsor HB 57, which is a bill designed to provide some structure and oversight to Bureau of Farms and Parole. I don't think it's any secret. Back in 2019, there was a quote-unquote reform bill passed that attempted to address some of the issues that they believe, I say they, I'm not one of they believe emerged from the previous group. They believe that too many people were being out. They believe that there were no standards in place. They believe that they weren't following rules. It's amazing to me that following rules and ultimately didn't follow any guidelines. I think there's direct evidence of that to show that, for example, there are rules in place to prohibit the current chair and the board from setting aside all cases 5 years after a denial of a parole hearing. They do it anyway. And as Attorney General said, Steve Marshall said, that the board is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Well, currently, if you're a Black applicant, your white counterparts are 2 times more likely to get parole and release than you are. But it's not just paroles, it's also pardons. For the entire fiscal year 2021, the same phenomenon, the same trend developed. You were a white applicant, you were 2 times more likely to get pardoned than a black applicant. So this bill creates oversight. It doesn't, as many people have tried to portray it as, open the door to the facilities to just let people out. What it does, it tries to provide an objective standard to all applicants that appear before the board. So we have a way of knowing that they're being treated fairly, that due process is in place. And in the event something happens, we have a methodology behind it so we can explain how this person got out or why this person did not. And if you're ultimately involved or concerned about public safety, the whole concept of parole is to take a look at who's before you and determine if they're a risk to reoffend or not. They're a risk to public safety or not. If you don't have any methodology to determine if that is the case or not, you're pretty much just guessing based upon my reading of the numbers that your skin color may be involved in it, then how can we replicate that process? How can we prevent future tragedies if we don't know why or how you're making your current decision? And this symbiotic relationship between this community and the criminal justice system, all parties involved depend on fair, swift justice. Whatever your concept of that justice is, everybody has to have enough confidence in the system to know that your skin color or any other thing that you cannot control is not playing a role in whether or not you get released. The bill would also create a right to an appeal. Now, you'll hear others, such as the Attorney General, say that it undermines the board's independence and authority. That's the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, it just gives objectivity to it. But if they wanted to take a look at that and ignore the guidelines of that situation, they still can. But now, if House Bill 57 passes, they'd have to give a reason. And why is that important? Because if you are applying for parole and you get denied, you would like to know why. So you can go back, do what's necessary. The next time you appear before the board, you understand what makes you more eligible. So in that sense, we all should be looking for ways to provide oversight, to provide guidelines, and also to provide due process and the right to appeal in the event that the board doesn't follow direction or follow guidelines in some of the rulings that they make. And ultimately, as we've seen, because this process is not unique, we want to do sentencing guidelines in Alabama because we have wide disparities in sentences across the judicial circuit to judicial circuit. We appointed an independent commission to look at that, create sentencing guidelines, and now the judges across the state, district attorneys, all defendants now know what the guidelines for the particular charges are. And what we have seen, the guidelines that are in place, that the disparity no longer exists from judicial circuit to judicial circuit. So we are already familiar with the methodology. So I don't understand why we would be uncomfortable doing it in this situation, unless, of course, you are comfortable with the results that you see. So House Bill 57 does not undermine the board, does not take away their authority or their independence. It gives some objectivity to the process. It gives some oversight so when they need to be reined in as possible through the appeal process. And it helps give guidance so we all can have some confidence that the decisions that are being made by the board are actually with safety and public safety in mind. So with that, I think good government requires us to support House Bill 57. And if anybody out there, including the Attorney General and district attorneys out there, are telling you that this is the way that's supposed to be, you need to ask them to explain to you that all that independence, all that subjectivity has created a racial disparity where 2 to 1, 2 white applicants for every 2, it's 2 to 1. So if that's your board and you own that, then you should have a reasonable explanation for that racial disparity. So at this point, I thank you for coming, and I'll pass the mic to whoever else is speak.
Thank you so much, Representative England. Next up in our lineup, we're going to hear from Dillon Nettles from the ACLU of Alabama. Dillon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dillon Nettles, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director of the ACLU of Alabama. My colleagues and I at the ACLU of Alabama have closely followed the activity of the Pardons and Paroles Board for over the last few years, and the data makes clear that this board is not operating with public safety or rehabilitation of those incarcerated in mind. Let's keep in mind all I can do is pray for the people I hurt, try to do my best each day, and hope that one day I can truly be given a second chance. My two children, who were also victims in this case, support my parole. They have traveled to Montgomery and testified at each of my parole hearings, telling the board about my accomplishments in prison, including earning my 2-year associate's degree and completing dozens of programs to better myself. Each time the board denies my parole, my children wonder why their experience as victims does not carry the same weight as victims who ask for parole be denied. They have never received support from victims advocates and are not even allowed to sit in the victims waiting room at parole hearings simply because they support me. Our system appears to only value victims who are intent on keeping people like me locked up as long as possible. In closing, I would like to say I'm not the same scared and hurting woman that I was in 1996 when I came to prison. Not everyone who commits a violent crime is a bad person or dangerous. Many violent crimes have a whole context that most people never hear about. I pray the members of the parole board stop denying people based on their past and start evaluating parole candidates based on their records, their accomplishments, all the things that they have been told to earn a chance at parole. My hope is that one day this board will change and I can be released on supervised release to be with my family and start earning more than $2 a day I'm paid to in my current situation. That is impossible. Thank you for your willingness to listen and the work that is being done to reform our parole system. I know I speak for thousands of men and women who feel hopeless, but still pray things can change. Sincerely, Michelle Mann. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Dana.
Thank you so much, Dillon. As her testimony illustrates, it is essential that these pieces of legislation pass. And we have one final speaker who was planning to be here with us today. Do we have an update on Mrs. Files, who we know is stuck in traffic?
My name is Cookie Garner. I'm the co-founder of the Concerned Citizens Organization. I'm here to speak on behalf of David and Diane Files, who their son has done everything that was asked of him to get out on parole. Their son has not been able to get on parole because he's been denied at every chance. David has done everything, every program. He's never got in trouble. His mom and dad are on their way here now to speak, but they got caught in some traffic. I drove in from Birmingham. I can speak to what's happening myself personally because I have two sons. One of them that has gone up for parole 3 times and been denied, and he's totally innocent of his crimes. We have another mother, Angela Tucker, that's in the Women's Work Center in Birmingham. And she goes out to work, and her husband couldn't get here because they live in Mobile. They have a young daughter, and he couldn't get here, and she's in the same predicament. I mean, she has a clear record ever since she's been incarcerated. She's served multiple years, and she can't go home on pardon and parole. We need to say yes to these bills because this is going to impact overcrowding, hopefully cut down on some of the murders that are happening in the prison system right now. And I support both of these bills.
So much. At this time, this files is here yet. She's on her way. She'll be here in just a couple minutes. So if the press would be willing to stick around for 5 minutes, we expect that we'll be able to. But we can take questions from the press at this time.
You said before yesterday that you were getting pushback from the DAs. Is this the DA's association or individuals?
I think it's probably a mix of both. And make phone calls to their respective member, asking them to vote against the bill. Also, to be quite honest, it was quite apparently, instead of just kind of sticking to the facts, talking about the merits of it, they much rather just engage in misinformation and try to manipulate people into voting against actually a pretty reasonable advancement to create oversight and accountability on the role. So I think also if you saw the Attorney General's press release on Monday, he kind of digs deep into the same misinformation about legislation. So it's one of those things that kind of try to scare people with demagogue issues so they don't have to actually look such things.
Representative, forgive me, I was late. Why did you delay your vote yesterday? Do you think it was not enough to pass?
Well, I think it should be just work. Again, the misinformation of the Attorney General and many others were spreading about the legislation proved effective. So we want a little bit more time to kind of try to put some of that to bed. And also there's a Senate campaign of the bill sponsored by Senator is working. So give it an opportunity to also kind of replicate the system and make the session works. We can get up and try to do it again. Correct. It's the whole purpose of it is to do the same thing we've done in the past with sentencing guidelines. It's create a temporary committee to actually look at creating guidelines. Actually, look at the 2019 reform bill that passed. Same sort of risk and needs assessments, guidelines. Those were also adopted in our legislation. Just were required to be used. So ultimately, the whole point of that was to get some data, so we'll have a better sense of what it takes to be released, whether or not you are at risk or not. And if you're not using those, then you don't really have a clue as to what the methodology is behind how you reach the conclusions that you do. And I want to stress this: if the Attorney General Steve Marshall says the board is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, using their independence and subjective discretion to create the results that we have. And those results ultimately result in a racial disparity. Then you also have to explain how that happens through the subjective picks that you make. Because ultimately, if we've got objectivity in the system and the results are the same, then you have an explanation for it. But if the parole board can look at every individual and assess them individually and base their decision to deny on anything, which apparently also includes race, then you got a problem. So this bill would ultimately give us the ability to look at that to determine if, in fact, it's the system or it's the decision makers that have the problem. I mean, also, you make a great point. Just because you committed a violent offense in your past does not make you a violent offender. And also, people walk in front of that parole board and they've done everything they've done and they needed to do to be released. And they've been there for 15 years. parole board looks at them and says, well, what you did 20 years ago was too serious in order to consider who you are right now and to fix the whole purpose. So there are people who sit in our facilities who are the lowest risk possible, who leave every day and go back just like it's a hotel. We pay for that. Meanwhile, nonviolent offenders who are supposed to be less risk come in and out, and the people who've been there for 20 years watch them come and go. So obviously, if our system is supposed to be about public safety, and we're talking about the numbers who indicate less of a risk, most of the offenders who've been there for 15 to 20 years are less of a risk than the people that keep matriculating through the system like it's a hotel. So again, the whole point of this legislation is to put those guidelines in place so we have a better idea of how they make those decisions and how to make them more effectively and make sure that if we're about public safety, we've got science, we've got numbers, we've got data behind the decisions that we're making.
Hey everyone, if people can give a thumbs up if you could see me and hear me, that would be great. Okay, let me share my screen. So my name is Jasmine Peeples. I'm with the ACLU of Alabama. I'm the digital media strategist and my pronouns are she, her. And I wanted to walk you all through the toolkit that we have provided for the Twitter rally portion of this lobby day. So this is just kind of a quick section that provides update on the statuses of these bills, House Bill 57 and Senate Bill 215. It also provides an overview as far as some of the information you've already heard today, but also just, providing more hyperlinks, like if you want to look at some of the data we've been talking about, another summary of House Bill 57, as well as, I believe this goes to the direct bill language for Senate Bill 215, which is again identical to House Bill 57. So, and if you also just want to learn more about the state of Alabama's partisan paroles, you can look at some more reports on the Alabama Smart Justice website. You're just able to look at multiple reports. You can also look at stories and just kind of see a lot of the reporting that has been going on around, this issue. So now scrolling down to instructions, we've already did number 1 and 2, and now we're on 3, where like if you aren't able to begin tweeting at 1 p.m., you can use some tools such as TweetDeck to schedule out tweets ahead of time. But just also this toolkit will be evergreen. It will always be live. So you're always able to come back to this and use it as a resource days, weeks from now. So one thing to keep in mind that we will be using paroles are important as a hashtag. So once you do like a tweet or a post, and again, like we are focusing on Twitter, but feel free to use Facebook and Instagram if you would like. But this is the way that we all can see each other's hashtags, including this hashtag paroles are important. So if you live in Alabama, please be sure to tag your rep, and we will get into that in just a second. And just like Steph mentioned earlier, you can send a message to a representative that's already pre-drafted. This is an example. Well, this is a website, and we have like some sample text where it's kind of like a subject, like why isn't it the parole board following its own guidelines? Some pre-drafted text for you, and then you can edit this, just to fit how you want it. And you just like enter your information so it matches. Make sure this goes to like the right representative, and that's why we're asking for an address. It just helps plug into your correct House representative. And this will also be going to the Senate Judiciary committee members. So you're seeing like people have been taking action. So you'll, just once you take action, people will be able to see. And then also, okay, so we also have listed some organizations that are led by directly impacted people. So if you want, you could, just click through any of these organizations' links and go to their website and support them and see a lot of the work that they're doing. And then also going into the sample tweets. These are some tweets that we've already drafted. Just kind of like this column allows you to see like if a situation fits you. So like if you're an Alabama voter, faith leader, someone who has experience with Alabama's criminal justice system, these are suggested posts that we have made. So you can just like either copy and paste, or you can click the tweet also, and it will automatically draft like a tweet for you. I will say there is one thing that you should note, that sometimes you may have to fill in like your actual rep's handle, or I believe here, like, so it says insert faith here. If you wanted to use this tweet, you're, just make sure that you're filling in these sections where they're asking you to insert something. So like, for example, the media handle, if you want to tag media, we have a list of media handles below that I will get to in a second that you can then paste in. So feel free to use any of these. You can also just like pull from these if you don't feel like a certain situation, and alter it to match what you want to say. And a lot of these tweets either have already included the pros or important hashtag, or it may have something like AL politics, which is just a hashtag that's popular on Twitter for things that are happening in Alabama regarding politics. Okay. So now we have the sample graphics. These are just some examples where folks can use these to post when they're making like a tweet or a post on Facebook. And I wanted to click down here and just make sure that you all see, like this is the actual folder which houses all of the graphics. So you have Twitter graphics. It in actuality is like a lot more than what you see in the toolkit, but these are just a lot of graphics that you can use, and these are all shaped for Twitter. So it's just giving like dimensions in that size. So if you're using Twitter, you want to be sure that you are using the Twitter version graphic, because it will ensure that people are seeing the entire image once you post them. So I'm just going through a few of the graphics. And then the same thing for Facebook and Instagram. They have the different dimensions than Twitter. So we have made them like in a square shape. So just again, making sure that folks can see like the entire graphic once you're posting it. Okay. And then we're going to scroll down to the contact list. So this is where you can find out what district you live in. You would enter in your information, and then this website would help provide that. And then also, if you already know your person, you can just scroll down and find whatever district it is, their name, and then their Twitter handle if you want to add them. So these are just some people we've already added for the Alabama Senate, the Alabama House as well. So some of the people who are, and if they have an ad, that means they actually have like a Twitter account and they're active on the Twitter account. For some of the ones that are blank, they either don't have a Twitter account or it's most likely not even checked. And then also we have the media section where you can target directly Alabama reporters. So it goes from MSNBC to AL.com. So just like if you wanted to find someone, just look and see like their affiliation. And then you're just able to, once again, click the tweet, and then it automatically drafts a tweet for them. And it's gonna include like the @ in the situation of Joyce White Vance. So that is the entire toolkit. If anyone has any questions, I see someone put, so yeah, Steph has dropped the toolkit in the chat. But if anyone has any questions, just drop them below and I can answer them. And we are inviting people to begin tweeting at 1 o'clock. This just helps kind of keep all of our tweets like in the, same, kind of like the same area, I guess you could say, as far as with the timeline. So it'll just be more of a surge rather than like spaced out sporadically. We want to just kind of make it more of a surge so that we're making sure that people are getting eyes on them. But also feel free to use this toolkit anytime that you want. This will be an evergreen kit. I believe that's actually listed somewhere. So like we'll be keeping this document live, and the status updates will continue to be added until session is over. So you will always be able to, if you want to, just bookmark this and come back, anytime that you need to look and see what's going on right here, or also just to pull any of these graphics anytime that you want. So if that is, if I don't have any questions, I will be passing it back over to Stuff. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Jasmine. All right, y'all. We really appreciate y'all being here. We will send you all of these particular resources that we shared in the chat. We really appreciate y'all's patience with our technical difficulties. We are a scrappy little team. But again, thank you so much for being here. If you have other questions, you have specifically Deb's email for the parole questions. And then when we send out the email with the resources, feel free to reply with any additional questions. But again, thank you for being here. We hope you all have a really good day. And don't forget to tweet. All right, bye y'all.